Okay, welcome to another episode of Beyond Reproach.
Howdy.
Howdy. I'm Tux.
I'm Stephanie.
We be drinking.
Yeah. And we're Beyond Reproach.
Yes.
When I was a kid at school learning the golden rule, teacher often used to say, if you don't tell a lie, there's not a reason why you can't be like Washington someday. How could Washington be a married man and never tell a lie?
So, the last episode was real long, guys. Sorry. There's been a lot of back and forth between me and Stephanie and our unofficial podcast producer.
Tim, we love you.
Yes,
and
thanks,
also,
Tim.
we're sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we stand by the content of the last
Yeah,
episode.
It was fun.
The cocktails that I made last time were a little too strong. We got a little too drunk.
Yeah.
And we got real chatty.
Yeah,
and
real chatty.
That episode
Lots
is
of
real long, but I
detours.
think that we kind of just have to come to terms with the fact that sometimes our episodes are going to be real long because these stories are really involved and we are nerds, history geeks, you may
Yeah.
say, and we enjoy talking about politics. So
Yeah, we had ourselves a time. It was the first time we recorded without without Tim,
yeah,
and it shows it. But yeah, I do stand by the episode. It's really fun and really interesting.
yeah.
And just it's so crazy.
If it was too long for you, I think that just try and break it up. Try and listen to the first story and then stop it and then go back to it. If you don't have
3 hours.
2.5 hours to listen
You
to
don't
us
have a
fucking
smooth 3
yammer on,
hours.
then that's fine. It's just the nature of the tales that the yarns that we're spinning.
Yeah, I enjoy podcasts that are a bit more sprawling,
Yeah.
rambling,
Yeah,
scrambling, if you will.
I certainly will.
So I don't mind listening to a podcast that's like 3 hours, but I know that I am not the norm
Yeah,
at all.
it's worth listening to.
It is worth.
I'd say it's
100%.
worth breaking up.
100%.
But I just want to talk a little bit about like history and why we like history. Like we are nerds. If you haven't figured that out already, when I was a kid, I hated history. I thought history was the most boring subject in school.
Oh, I hated it too.
I think it really has to do with the way history is taught in schools and like the way tests are organized.
And just the subject matter.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean
Yeah.
about like the way it's taught in school.
Yeah.
There is an interesting way to tell these stories
Yeah.
that doesn't put you to sleep.
Well, most textbooks are written in Texas, so
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Well, they leave a lot out. The interesting stuff is left out.
100%.
I'm terrible with dates. I
Same.
can never remember people's
Same.
birthdays.
Yeah.
I'm so bad with dates. I always forget everything, and I keep like a running tally of stuff in my phone so that I don't forget. Literally, I have a reminder on my phone every Sunday morning, call your grandma.
I have the same reminder to call home. Yeah.
Yeah, because I will forget.
Yeah, but then I'll remember like inane nonsense.
Yeah, but I think the reason I didn't like history class was because dates are so important
Oh,
in the way
100%,
you're
yeah.
tested,
It's very date heavy.
and I can't
Yeah.
remember. I mean, I do remember like at least the years that like World War II.
December 7th?
Yeah, but it's because I love World War II history
Yeah.
so much that I paid enough attention to it that I remember it now. But like specific dates of like certain battles and shit,
God, no.
I'm not going to remember that shit.
No.
And so, as kids do, I hated having to put effort into schoolwork. And, like, if it didn't come naturally to me, I
like,
got pissed and, like, fuck this,
whatever.
I hate this shit.
Yeah.
So, I did poorly in tests in history class because I couldn't remember the dates, even though I remembered the subject.
See, I could hold the dates in my mind for a test, and then the minute, like, pencil down, it floats out of my brain.
Well, which is the...
Because why do I need to know this? Like, I
Exactly.
just want an A.
Yeah. Well, and that's the dumbest way of
Yeah.
teaching. Like,
Oh,
if
100%.
you're teaching
rote
somebody how to...
memorization is not the way to learn.
No. And you're teaching kids how to pass tests.
Mhm.
You're not teaching them
No.
the subjects.
No.
You're teaching them how to pass a test.
No. And you're not giving them, like, background.
Yeah.
Like, if you're just giving them dates and no, like,
And
background
the
about
driest like nitty gritty of the story with like nothing fun
Yeah.
to tell. You know what I mean? You're not telling them the fun stuff. You're
Yeah.
like, this happened in this year, and
Yes.
this happened in this year, and like
Yeah.
nobody wants to.
Nobody cares.
Nobody's gonna remember that shit, and then
No.
everyone is gonna think that they hate history, and that's why there's so many people in this country that are like, history's boring. Why do I need to know this?
Yeah.
Let's make that mistake again because we don't know that it was a mistake that we've already made. Let's vote a fascist dictator in.
God.
Because that's never
They're like,
happened before.
What's fascism?
Yeah. Good
Good-
times.
yeah.
but
Memories.
but there is a way to teach history that is
100%.
interesting.
Yeah.
There is a way to teach history where you're telling stories that are fun and
Relatable,
factual. Yes,
too.
and relatable, and even though maybe the subject is 200 years old, it's still sort of contemporary
Yeah.
if you tell it correctly.
Like, that's how I learn things, if it relates to me, because
Yeah.
I'm very self-involved.
Yeah, well, I mean, not just you. That's
No,
the world that
but-
we live in.
But that's how you retain
Yeah.
if it feels like it matters to you.
Yeah, something that you can actually wrap your head around, I
Yeah.
think, is the main goal. But that's kind of our goal, is to tell stories that are relatable and factual
100%.
and interesting, and
Yeah.
you learn something, but you laugh at the same time. And there's a lot of that going around right now. Shows like Adam Runs Everything and shows like Drunk History
Yeah.
are
Drunk
so
History's so good.
there clearly is
A market for it.
a market.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
Because
small
people want to know about history.
Yeah, and even people that thought that they hated history in school
Yeah. Oh,
are watching
100%.
Drunk History
Yeah.
and loving it
Loving
because
it.
it's told in a way
Yeah.
that's fun.
Yeah, it's engaging.
Yeah, and you can still even if it is the same stories that you learned in school about
Oh, it's never
about
it's,
anything.
yeah,
I mean,
Harriet Tubman is
Harriet
the one,
Tubman,
it's the only one I've seen, and I'm just like, this is hilarious.
oh my god, there's so many interesting stories. Theirs are obviously in a much shorter format than ours are.
Yes,
which
much
is
shorter.
But I think we're telling details that are still interesting to people, and I hope that you're enjoying it, and I hope that you don't hate us. And we're not putting you to sleep. Let us know.
Or if you do hate us, you can just hate us quietly.
Yeah.
You don't need to know.
We're fragile.
Just hold that in your heart.
This is the babyest podcast at this point.
Yeah,
We're on
it's so
episode
cute.
3. We don't know what we're doing. We did a better job with episode 1 than we were expecting,
100%,
and I think there was a lot of we got this, and then we didn't.
Well, you told me that your story was going to be really long, and I thought my story was going to be short until I started researching my story, and then it completely got away from me.
Yeah.
And
But it's so good. Your story,
It
that
is
story
really
was
good,
so funny.
but I could
think
have saved it for another time.
you guys, this shit is for free.
Yes.
So if you don't like it, go fuck yourself. But we love you.
We
Come
love
back.
you.
Come
just,
back.
Just kidding.
Sorry.
JK.
Should we talk about
The cocktail.
political shit?
Oh,
yeah.
wait.
Let's
Let me-
drink.
We can talk
Yeah.
about political shit and drink.
Stephanie's going first this episode. And what's the sort of time frame of your story again?
It's like the turn of the 1800s.
Okay.
So like late 1790s
Okay.
ish. I don't want to give you a hard date, but yeah. But I
That-
gave
yeah,
you
yeah.
enough for the cocktail.
Yeah. Every episode we're going to be drinking a little bit, and the goal is that every episode will have sort of a cocktail that goes along with the
Yes.
time,
A
the
paired-
era of the
paired-
first story.
Vintage cocktail.
Yes. This cocktail is called a sangaree, which is sort of obviously sounds similar to sangria, and it's sort of similar. I guess it has the same root word as sangria,
Yeah.
the same Spanish root word, but it's not exactly sangria. Rather than just sort of like sweetened wine with fruit in it, a sangaree is
Like it's more powerful cousin.
it's definitely stronger than sangria. It started in the 1700s in
It's a Spanish thing, right?
yeah, like Spanish explorers in the Caribbean, basically, the Antilles, it says. Spanish merchants were mixing a special type of rum from Havana called Batavia Arak,
Okay.
with red wine or port wine. Probably port wine a lot because port wine is fortified so it would travel better. And then some nutmeg and citrus. So in the 1700s this was invented, but
What
it was
does
popular
fortified mean?
Fortified it's stronger
Condensed,
than wine.
right?
It's stronger than wine. So it has I don't know if they add extra alcohol to it
Okay.
or if it's fermented longer so that there's extra
okay.
they might add extra sugar to it before it's fermented so that it becomes more alcoholic.
Okay.
If there's any port wine aficionados in the audience, let us know.
Yes, please do.
Basically, fortified means it has more alcohol than regular wine.
Okay.
And port means it's from Portugal, or at least originated in Portugal. Port wine.
That makes sense.
But so these Spanish merchants were making this sort of cousin to sangria in the 1700s, but then it became really popular in the 1800s. In 1860s, Jerry Thomas wrote a cocktail book, which we've mentioned before in episodes. I think episode 1, I made a cocktail called
what is it called?
Cobbler.
Oh, yeah,
a sherry.
Oh, sherry cobbler.
Sherry cobbler. That is also from Jerry Thomas's 1862 Bartender's Guide. But this book had 6 different recipes for sangaree.
Wow.
And it can be made with red wine, it can be made with port wine, and some of the recipes even had it made with ale.
Oh.
Yeah, instead of wine. But usually it's like stronger spirits, rum, cognac, whatever.
Yeah.
With red wine or port or beer.
How it tastes with ale.
I know. I mean, I have that book,
Yeah,
so maybe we'll try it another
Yeah.
time. So we thought that this sangaree would be fun. This recipe is sort of a little bit modernized. Instead of the Batavia Arak, it has dark rum, applejack, which is apple brandy, if you're not familiar, American apple brandy, and port wine, a little maple syrup, some apple slices, and nutmeg, freshly grated nutmeg.
Yes.
I literally brought a nutmeg grater. And
Just like, what are those?
yeah, it's because I was going to bring the shaker thing of nutmeg with me because I travel here with all this shit.
Yeah.
But I was out of nutmeg, so.
Oh, okay. I like that you just have nutmeg.
But I also happen to have, because
Just
I'm
lying
a
about.
fucking weirdo, I
Yeah.
have fresh
Amazing.
nutmegs in a jar with an actual nutmeg grater in my house.
As one has, just
Yeah, no big deal.
lying about.
It's because I really like eggnog. And like, I love eggnog. I know.
It's so much.
You can't
like
have
it.
a lot.
I like it in theory,
Yeah.
but
there's also
this
there's other.
amount of eggnog would be perfect.
So this sangaree, we're having it in these little cutesy cocktail glasses called Nick and Nora glasses that are only probably 4 ounces.
Yeah, they're adorable.
Yeah. So that much eggnog would be great.
Yeah.
But eggnog is real thick, especially if you're drinking homemade eggnog that has like actual eggs and
Yeah.
it's not cooked like
It just sits in the
like store bought. Yeah. It's so good.
It is good. I like the spiciness of it.
Yeah.
Like, I get it.
There's also a
get
cocktail
it.
called milk punch.
Oh.
There are many different
That
versions
sounds
of milk punch.
horrifying.
Well, so there's an old school, like 1800s milk punch that apparently George Washington had a recipe that is really popular even today.
Really?
But it's like, it's aged and it's somehow like the milk separates out and then
No.
you strain it and drink the liquid. It sounds
so
disgusting.
foul.
I want to try it. I would totally try it.
How do people not get sick?
I know.
Maybe the alcohol keeps them.
I think it's the
Like-
alcohol keeps it. There's also, what is it? Coquito? That's like a Puerto Rican
yes.
eggnog with coconut milk.
Yes.
Yeah, apparently you're not supposed to say that. It's not Puerto Rican eggnog. I have Puerto Rican neighbors that would smack
I
me
think
upside.
it's Dominican.
Is it Dominican? Oh my
I think
god.
it's Dominican.
Tim, edit this out.
Yeah. They're going to come for
I
you.
know.
Oh.
But no, you're not supposed to say that it's eggnog because it's not eggnog.
But it's their version of...
But I think they came up with it separately, independently,
okay.
I should say. So
Okay.
it's not. If
Okay.
the comparison to eggnog is not welcome.
Ooh, good to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been told. So
yeah,
I've
I have a
been told.
coworker who makes his own, and he bottles it. He's a graphic designer, so he puts
it's
like
so
his
good.
face on the label.
Oh my god, that's
Like
amazing!
Carlos
Does he
is-
sell it?
Yeah, he sells it in the wintertime. If you want a bottle,
I love coquito.
it's so good.
Yeah,
Like
I need that in my life.
Okay.
There's also aged eggnog, which is how they used to make it
Aged eggnog.
in the South. When you would make eggnog for like Christmas time, you would make Christmas's eggnog in like January the year before.
That's...
But there's so much alcohol in it that it doesn't spoil, basically,
Oh.
because it's like antibacterial or whatever, the
Okay.
alcohol. But it's really good. It's super tasty. I mean, it's still dairy and alcohol, so it's like, obviously you're not going to want to drink like 10 of them.
Yeah.
Anyways, sangaree, it's delicious. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Let's
Cheers.
try
Have you
this.
even tried it yet?
No, I haven't. I've been waiting. You made me wait. No.
Delightful.
Ooh.
It's strong. It's an interesting flavor. It doesn't really taste like anything. It doesn't taste like
It
sangria.
tastes appley.
Yeah,
I like it.
because of the applejack.
Yeah.
It doesn't really taste like sangria.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, I taste the port wine and the apple. That's nice. It tastes like a wintry
Yeah,
drink.
a very sort of autumnal or wintry.
Yeah, autumnal. So yeah, my story is of this era. I chose this story because in my mind it's small, it's buttoned up, like I can handle it. It's not gonna get away from me this time. So I wanted a scandal that felt topical, since we find ourselves at the end of the midterms, looking forward toward the general election.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that 2020 is going to be the shittiest of shit shows, because we are living in a post-fact, post-decency, post-empathy,
Yeah.
post-everything
Yeah.
good world.
Oh, what a world, in the words of Homer Simpson.
Yeah, so I was looking specifically for a scandal about negative campaigning, because I see that coming,
Yeah.
and I want to be prepared.
Butter emails.
Oh my god. Oh, butter
Sorry,
emails.
we're not going to do that. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
Who am I kidding?
So in my research, I stumbled upon the origins of negative campaigning.
Oh.
And as you can tell from these cocktails, it started almost instantly. Started very early. Can you guess which president started?
But you're talking like early 1800s? Or like late 1700s?
And that, yeah.
God, I can't.
I mean, our founding fathers, they were united in bringing this nation together, where everyone was free to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Unless you... Never mind.
Well, yeah. I mean, they wrote the Declaration of Independence, and the first sentence is kind of a lie. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
All white landowning men.
Yeah, exactly. That was in the notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, footnote.
The first sentence of that was a lie. So we were off to a really great start, and negative campaigning was soon to follow. It started with John Adams and Thomas Jefferson in the election of 1800. So the scandal that I'm doing is kind of negative campaigning in general, but I'm focusing on the Alien and Sedition Acts, and that's 4 laws, and then the elections that surround those acts. So just a bit of background about John Adams and Jefferson. Everyone kind of knows the standard information. Jefferson's from Virginia. Adams is from Massachusetts. They're both founding fathers. Some people know that Adams organized and selected the committee of 5 who drafted the Declaration of Independence. Adams asked Jefferson to write the document. Jefferson politely asked Adams that he should do it himself. So they went back and forth, and in the end, Jefferson did agree to write the Declaration, because Adams basically gave him 3 really good points. 1, Jefferson was a better writer. He was a lot more well-liked. Adams, he said this of himself, that he was obnoxious, suspected, and unpopular. And he thought that Jefferson should write it also because he was a Virginian, and Virginians should appear to be at the head of this business, so he said. Because they don't want, these ideas coming from these Northerners, all these high and mighty plans. It should come from a Southerner.
Okay,
So,
sure.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
Whatever you say.
So once it was written, it was Adams who argued it before Congress, and, the rest is history. Everyone knows that part. So clearly these two were really good friends back in 1776, but by the election of 1800, their party politics had so polarized that they were like mortal enemies. Like they tried to destroy each other in the press. It was crazy. So I'm going to back up a bit just to give an abbreviated look at our first election, the election of 1789, because the process was a little bit different back then.
Okay.
So do you know how they elected presidents?
Not really, no.
Okay.
Go on.
I mean, I didn't, which is I think I just turned my brain off in history class.
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's going back to
It's
what
like,
we were just saying.
You're
It's
teaching me lies, so I'm gonna check out right now.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna hit the eject button and I'm out of here. So back then, each state had presidential electors, the Electoral College, who would gather on February 4th to cast their 2 votes for the president. The person with the most votes would be the president, and the person who was the runner-up would be the vice president.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, exactly. So Adams Adams' credentials as a revolutionary secured him 34 votes, but he finished in second place behind General George Washington's 69 votes.
Ooh.
Yeah. Sexy. He got a
I'm so
sexy amount
juvenile.
of votes.
Like, what is this, third grade countdown?
So accounts kind of differ. It is possible that Adams got like several more votes, but Alexander Hamilton, it's so hard for me not to sing his name. Alexander Hamilton. He was behind the scenes, and he convinced a few electors not to vote for Adams because he wanted it to be like a landslide for Washington. He didn't want it to be a tie. He wanted it to be like a real defeat, a crushing defeat.
Huh.
So he convinced a few of the electors to switch votes, basically. So this is our nation's first election, and there's already voter suppression and tampering.
Good times.
So we're off to a fine start.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into Hamilton just because I am so incredibly obsessed with his musical that, I mean, I've been listening to it for 3 years. I listen to it probably once a week for 3 years. So
Well, yeah, I mean, also, that's for another episode. I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda is going to be on episode 4. Just kidding.
You dare play with my heart. Like,
you didn't know?
I hate you. I hate you so much. I like rehearse if I was ever to meet him on the street. Like, I would not say, like, can I lick your face, because that's creepy and I don't want him
Just
to know.
lick his feet instead. That's less creepy.
Oh God. I'm just gonna tell him he's a great artist. And he's brilliant. And also, if he wants it, he can have it. And then I can just walk away.
Here's my number.
Short and sweet, yes. So yeah,
Awesome.
no joking that he's going to be here.
Sorry.
It's heartbreaking.
Not yet. That'll be season 2.
So I'm not going to go into Hamilton, but for all everyone needs to know is that Hamilton is Washington's like wingman. So George
Washington. Go to the club.
What? Oh wow! Now there's a storm.
Oops.
Ooh. So George Washington was elected unanimously, air quotes, twice, in a culture that couldn't be more different than it is today. Back then, there was no partisanship, like none whatsoever. Like they were...
Did they have parties?
No.
Okay.
They didn't have parties. Not yet. Well,
I wish we didn't have parties.
Yeah, back then they ruled by consensus. It was their founding principle. It was assumed that everyone in politics believed in a common good and that they were all working towards it in their own way. Like,
that's
how
cute.
naive. Like,
that's adorable.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was reading that and like trying not to laugh. I'm like, oh wow.
Yeah. Clearly, I do vote sort of party lines, but it's more because I pay attention to promises and politics and like individual platforms, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. If I'm paying attention to somebody's platforms, it just happens to be that I always agree with the Democrats more. But if I were to come across somebody who called themselves a Republican or a fucking banana, I would vote for the Banana Party.
Yeah.
If I agreed with what they were saying.
Yeah.
However, that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, we're not living in that time where we have those options. Things are so polarized. But back then, like, everyone was kind of in league with each other. They had different viewpoints.
I mean, that sounds great.
Yeah. It's because they all kind of knew each other. And
it was so fresh. It was like they had just created this thing together. And there was no opposition.
Yeah.
Even if they sort of didn't always agree on the same points.
That was until Alexander Hamilton. I'm going to try not to do that every time, but it's going to be really hard.
You've already done it.
I know. He's going to weave his way through the story, and I'm not going to do that every time, but I might do that every other time. So that being said, during Washington's presidency, deep philosophical differences start to emerge between the two leading political figures in his administration.
They hated abortion. And Mexicans.
Close.
They didn't start hating Mexicans till the mid-1800s,
It was mostly about, I mean, they disagreed on a lot of things, but it was like foreign policy that was their biggest.
Sure.
There was like Team France versus Team Britain.
I mean, literally, that's a dream to me. Like, I wish what we could disagree over.
The two political figures that were at war with each other was Alexander Hamilton,
You didn't
federally.
sing it this
I
time.
know.
Next time.
Next time. Yeah, every other time.
Every other time.
He was the then Treasury Secretary, and then Thomas Jefferson, who was the then Secretary of State. So these two could not agree on domestic or economic or even foreign policy. They agreed on nothing. So within no time, this gap between them led to the founding of the Federalist Party by Hamilton and the Democratic Republican Party by Jefferson. So the Democratic Republicans, they wanted to reserve more power to state governments over the national government, and they accused the Federalists of leaning more towards a monarch style of government.
Wow.
The Democratic Republicans, they favored republics like France over Britain, and they wanted more active citizens.
It's funny, this
they
story
wanted,
is
like,
like...
revolutionaries, basically.
Yeah. You have to, like, think about the political landscape in Europe at that time, too,
it's crazy.
to, like, really wrap your head around what's happening.
Oh, I'll get there.
Because we're not talking about, like, current day England with figureheads and...
No, that we're talking about a king.
Like an actual king who actually was king and not just, like, didn't just live in a palace and have
And
no
then a
power.
king whose head was chopped off.
Oops.
And, my bad. So the Federalists, on the other hand, were pro-business conservatives who favored banks, and they preferred a stronger national government over the state one. Back then, the pro-business conservatives wanted a really strong national government. They favored Britain over France. They really opposed the French Revolution. And they wanted more passive citizens who just trusted that their government was going to do the right thing.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I stand in a weird place when it comes to my views of government, because I think that Republicans that are screaming for small government, air quotes, small government,
Small
really
enough to
don't
fit in my vagina.
Yeah. Well, I think what they mean is not that the reach of the government would be any smaller. It would just be in fewer hands.
Yes.
Whereas, I don't like a government who has strong power over, say, women's bodies, or who can marry, or marijuana, who can
become a citizen.
Yeah,
who
exactly.
Can be
Those things are
for no
not.
reason.
Those are not government issues in my mind. Those are not, But we also live in a time where people can't.
We live in a very different time.
Yeah, people can't get along, and we can't have nice things. So we have to have the government there to sort of step in and be like, no, fuck you.
It's such a different landscape.
Yeah,
that it's
absolutely.
Like there's no comparison to these parties today.
Yeah, abortion, gay marriage, these were not.
Yeah.
If you had even brought this up,
yeah, they would
like,
think
what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, some of them were atheists.
A lot of them, and proudly.
In the wake of these factions becoming a thing, Washington basically, because he's a general. He's not a politician. Mm-hmm. He decides that he's not going to run for a third term because he just can't deal with this partisanship that's now happening. Mm-hmm. He's just I'm just going to go back to Mount Vernon and
Which is why so many presidents only ran for 2 terms.
Yeah. Even
though it was not law.
Yeah.
At that time, people wouldn't run for more than 2 terms because that's how Washington did it.
Yeah, well, he was trying to set a precedent. He didn't want it.
Well, he didn't want a monarchy.
He didn't want a monarchy.
So if you're in power for too long, your fingers are in too many pies.
Yeah.
I would love to have my finger in multiple pies because I love pie.
So much of my early American history knowledge is from Hamilton the musical.
I don't like musicals. Don't tell anyone.
For shame.
I know, I'm not. I just can't.
Shame.
Although I went to Fire Island last week, and there was a drag show at Cherries in Cherry Grove, and they did a number from Sound of Music. And I sang along because I was a kid when I watched Sound of Music the first time.
And how did you feel?
I knew the words, and it made me feel conflicted on the inside. Because as somebody who...
You're thinking too much. You just need to...
Well, as somebody who repeatedly says they don't like musicals, to be drunk and singing along to the song from a musical...
It's your truest self. And
I just know the words because I did like that a lot.
Sounds like you're really trying to explain away your truest
Even when
self.
I was a child, I've always been fascinated by World War II.
Okay, so
Sorry.
A little bit of background on the election of 1796, and this is the one that Washington is stepping away from. Again, prior to this election, there was a general discomfort around the idea of partisanship. But this was before Alexander Hamilton.
Yay.
Before he ruffled all the feathers with his creative financial planning and his beautiful singing voice.
Oh. This cocktail is strong, too. God damn it.
God damn it.
There's no gin, but...
So, this was the first contested American presidential election.
Contested in
Like, there
what
were
respect,
two
Charlie?
parties, basically. Because before, everyone was just... There wasn't even a word for it. Like, everyone, I guess, was a Federalist because it was just Washington who ran for two
Oh, so
terms.
contested before the election. Like, contested...
Contested meaning that there's two
Parties.
like,
Opposite, okay.
trying to...
But you're not saying, like, after the election results...
No,
Okay.
not contested in that sense.
Okay.
So these two parties were more like factions with a certain viewpoint and certain leanings, but they didn't have like the hardened alliances or like voting patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Adams was the VP because he got second place, and he was running for president that year on the Federalist ticket, along with former Governor Thomas Pinckney of South Carolina. He was another revolutionary figure. The both of them were running on the Federalist ticket. And their opponents was the former Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, running with Senator Aaron Burr of New York on the Democratic-Republican ticket. So at this point in history, each candidate, regardless of faction or proto-party or whatever we want to call it, they ran alone. Like, there was no, like, president or VP situation yet. Like, a running mate wasn't a thing. Unlike the previous elections where the outcomes had been already decided, this time, like, both sides tried to campaign. The debate was pretty ugly. The Federalists were tying the Democratic Republicans to the violence of the French Revolution, and the Democratic Republicans were accusing the Federalists of favoring British monarchism and aristocracy. But even with this, Adams, who was Washington's VP, he did win. He got 71 votes, and he won by sweeping New England and the Mid-Atlantic states. Jefferson came in second with 68 votes, therefore he was the vice president. Pinckney received some votes, and also Burr, but yeah, not close enough. So this was the first time where president and vice president were from different parties. Could you imagine that?
Yeah. No.
If people were just running like as singular humans, and then the top two were president and VP.
And so what was, I mean, at that time, what kind of power did a vice president have?
They presided over the Senate. It's similar to
It's
the
okay,
power,
okay.
that they have.
Yeah.
They're like there with the tie break, and they're voting. So there was 48 remaining electoral college votes that were dispersed amongst 9 other candidates. Apparently it was a really big election season that year. But electors, they would cast one vote for a Federalist and then another vote for a Democratic Republican. So there wasn't, like, the Electoral College as it was set up to be, it was supposed to be nonpartisan. Like, you were supposed to be able to vote for whoever you wanted to.
Which is also weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird today, but that
Yeah.
sounds weird too. Let the fucking people decide. This is bullshit.
Yeah,
like,
that's...
the ruling class at that time just thought that the plebes, the paupers,
People
were too stupid to make
know
decisions
anything.
for themselves.
Yeah. But this election marked the formation of the party system.
Okay.
So it set up a rivalry between the Federalists of New England against the Democratic Republicans of the South, with the states in the middle holding the balance of power.
Wow.
Imagine that. Just the middle states just
The
having
middle.
so much power.
Mm-hmm.
So before I get into the Adams administration and the Alien Sedition Act and the election of 1800, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about what was happening in America at that time. The political climate of the late 1790s was really, really, really unstable, domestically and internationally. And back then, domestic and foreign policy were pretty much one and the same, because we're such a new nation and we're so dependent on them for trade and for even access to certain things in the U.S. France had recently increased the tax on our shipping, which led to something called the Quasi-War, which was a war that wasn't really formally declared, but it was like fought out on sea. And like France would steal some of our ships, and we'd steal some of their ships, and just back and forth. Adams, his administration had tried for years to bring the fighting to an end. He tried negotiating, and he he failed publicly, actually. He sent some negotiators over to France, and in order for the French to hear him, they required us to pay $250,000 just to sit down at the table.
What?
Yeah. So we were basically, like, we had no real power, so we were able to be, like, extorted by the French.
Ugh.
So that was, like, that scandal was leaked to a Philadelphia paper. The names of the 3 French negotiators were expunged and replaced with the letters X, Y, and Z. So it's known as the XYZ affair. And just Americans were pissed. They're just like, no one respects us, like, fuck France. And in addition, France had tried to influence that election. They published letters from the French minister in the U.S. encouraging voters to vote for Jefferson if they wanted to avoid a war with France, like, explicitly.
Holy shit.
Like, explicitly meddled in our elections.
Imagine a foreign power meddling in...
Yeah. But it's so brand new. So, but there were issues with the British as well. Tensions had eased with the signing of the Jay Treaty. I guess the Jay Treaty is the one that kind of brought the end of the Revolutionary War. But the English didn't respect our right to remain neutral in the wars that were happening over there.
The English.
Yeah.
Fuck those guys.
They wanted us to choose a side, and we were so, number one, in debt. Like, we had no money for any more wars, so we were trying to be neutral, and the British were just like, fuck that, no, choose a side. So the wars in Europe made the American Republic anxious. Like, it made sense. They feared that they weren't living in a stable economy. They felt that their independence and their neutrality was being questioned or even, like, ridiculed internationally. And with the wars raging overseas, the question of the control of Louisiana became a question, because Spain controlled Louisiana at this time.
Spain,
yeah. They had opened the Mississippi River and the port of New Orleans to Americans, but there was a fear that if France took it back, then they wouldn't have access to that really profitable port down there. There was also issues with just Americans, especially the ones on the western frontier. There was a question of their loyalty, like if shit fell apart, like would they back France or would they back the British? And also there was a lot of refugees coming in from the wars in Europe, so people fleeing the French Revolution and fleeing crackdowns in Ireland and Scotland because of, like, religious persecution there. So there's a lot of new faces with, like, strong accents, new people.
So we hated them all.
Basically. We were afraid of them. We were afraid of what. Yeah. Exactly.
That sounds completely.
Yeah. Right. Oh, what? Where have we heard this before? So, people were afraid that these people who were fleeing revolution would bring their radical politics with them across the ocean. Because a lot of them did have skills when it comes to press and organizing, because, they were active revolutionaries who were leaving because things just got a little bit too hot over there. So they were worried that there would be a revolution here because of these foreign agitators, basically. And there was a fear that the nation would dissolve. And everyone just felt really, really, really vulnerable and really afraid. And this is when Adams is coming into power. And he was very unpopular. He had threats from all sides. His biggest enemy was the press. Right? Sounds familiar. So back then, the papers were crazy back then. I mean, I guess they're crazy now, but they were extremely partisan. Like, they didn't even pretend to be impartial, would print outright lies and fabrications.
That's crazy.
When caught printing just, like, lies, what did they say? They said, like, oh yeah, it was not their job to verify the news before printing it.
What?
It was not their job. So they were basically Facebook. It was not their job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Right?
Huh.
It's
So
like,
whose
whose
job
job,
was it?
would it be? Whose job, if not yours? It's, I loved reading that. I'm like, wow, okay, that's crazy.
I mean, that's not to say that there aren't papers who have, like, editorial sections that are opinion-based or...
So the papers weren't fully lies. They did have things that were just printed. Like, they reprinted a lot of news from other states and news from overseas, and also, like, congressional minutes.
Ooh, congressional minutes.
Yeah.
That sounds
riveting.
super dry.
Right?
Yeah. Was there, like, a section that was like, this is editorial versus this is the news?
There was an editorial section, but there was also things that were news that were totally editorial.
That were printed as news.
Printed as news, but just lies and fabrication. Yeah. It was a vehicle for these warring factions, and there was a lot of pushback against Adams from Jefferson, obviously, but also from members of his own party, Mr. Alexander Hamilton.
You're doing a very good job of keeping track of when you sung it and when you stated it.
He was a man who ruffled a lot of feathers. I will leave it at that. But there was actual news in these papers, but mostly it was slander and fiery editorial, like, masquerading as news. But the XYZ affair was a really bad look for the Democratic Republicans. Despite that, they still attacked Adams. They didn't care. Their opposition to Federalists reached new heights because they continued to support France during their revolution. They supported France in such an extreme way that people were afraid that they were plotting to, like, revolt, like in the U.S., that they were plotting to overthrow the government.
Like, if they didn't win, then they would just take over anyways?
In some of the states that were controlled by Democratic Republicans, they refused to enforce certain federal laws. They started doing that.
I mean...
There was a whiskey tax that was...
Fuck that.
Yeah, exactly. That was proposed by Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, that bastard.
Yeah. Well,
Fuck that guy.
It was the first state tax, and
Okay.
The country was just so heavily in debt, like, they needed
Sure.
revenue. But people flipped out because, I mean,
Yeah,
whiskey.
don't fuck with my whiskey.
Yeah.
But also, we do live in a huge fucking country.
Yeah.
And if you want to have nice things, somebody's got to pay for them.
No, that's...
I am somebody who is wholeheartedly pro-tax.
100%.
Like, tax me more, please.
Because it helps me.
Yeah.
It helps everyone.
Tax me more so that we can fund things that...
Yeah.
I think we've
Like
mentioned
parks?
this before.
Yeah.
But if we could like...
Itemize
taxes and be like, this is what I support and this is what I don't support.
Yeah.
Do not put my tax money towards
If only.
war. Do not put my tax
that would
money
be
towards
amazing.
Space Force.
I know nothing about a space force.
Oh dear, Stephanie.
But now
I understand your need to like tune out the news.
Yeah. Okay.
You need to pay attention.
Shit. Damn it. Okay. Yeah. Every now and then, people wrote me back in. I'm just like the immigrants, like the kiddie concentration camps.
Concentration camps for Mexican babies.
How is not everyone in the street right now? Like, what am I fucking doing at work?
Because Fox News is like, no, they deserved it. They broke the law.
Like, within 2 days of finding out, like, I saw a rally and I like walked with them for 30 minutes. I'm like, this shit's crazy. And like, I signed every position that I could.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how every mother, like, I'm not even a mother. Just every human isn't out in the streets.
They're brown, so who gives a shit?
Oh, that's so crazy. Yeah, I can't.
America.
So there were some states that were starting to really push back against the federal government, and there, of course, were calls to secede.
Secede from what, motherfuckers? You just started.
You
like,
just started.
Calm down.
Yeah, like, come on. From the South, being like, no, we'll be our own thing, and it's like, good luck with that.
Goodbye.
Yeah, seriously. But
this country's too big. I really feel like...
Oh, it is. Way too big. But we're stuck together. There's no seceding for anyone. I mean, I wish, but no, it's not going to happen. So the Federalists accused the French and their immigrants of starting all these, civil unrests. And in an attempt to quell some of the uprising, Federalists introduced and Congress passed a series of laws collectively referred to as the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. So what were these laws and why were they scandalous? So Congress passed 4 measures. The Naturalization Act, it increased citizenship from 5 years to 14 years.
5 years is a long time.
5 years,
that's enough.
It was too, but then throughout Washington's presidency, it kept going up just because people were afraid of foreigners.
But
who needed to come over here to work the land. Like, we needed bodies.
I mean, literally, we were baby nation.
We needed people so badly. So it was 2 years, and then they moved it to 5, and now they moved it to 14 years.
This is the mentality of a nation of slaveholders.
Oh, 100%.
That, we
100%.
don't want these people who are not wealthy landowners to have any rights.
Yeah, exactly.
So fucked up.
Exactly. So that was one of their laws. The Alien Friends Act allowed the president during times of peace to imprison and deport non-citizens who they suspected were threats to the country.
What was this called again?
The Alien Friends Act.
Alf. No.
How cute.
That's
Yeah. So no trial, you're just deported or at best just imprisoned.
That sounds
just on suspicion.
That sounds so strange and so foreign and so unfamiliar.
Yeah, right? This story was just like, I couldn't imagine such madness.
How would they house these people if they didn't have empty Walmarts to put them in?
Oh, that's weird.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so there was also the Alien Enemies Act, which allowed the president to imprison and deport non-citizens who were from a hostile nation during wartime. So they wouldn't even have to be doing anything suspicious
if they were from
and this is what led to Japanese internment.
Oh, God.
Yeah, because
so even if they were citizens?
No, these are non-citizens.
Okay,
these are all non-citizens. These 3.
Well, this is for another story, but the story about like how you couldn't become a citizen if you were yellow or brown or you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, these rules are for white men.
Yeah.
Like whites.
Yeah.
The 5 to 14 years. Like there's no brown or colored folk.
It's so funny how like one story can turn into so many different
100%. Yeah, there's so many like threads.
Yeah.
That all started so early. Like,
yeah.
Almost instantly. Some of these things. It's crazy. So the 4th law that was in this act was the Sedition Act, which made it a crime to publish false, scandalous, or malicious writing against the government or its officials. So it outlawed fake news.
Huh.
They made it a crime that you could go to jail for. This is no longer a thing. No, it expired after Adams was in office.
Like nobody told Alex Jones.
Yeah, I know, right? So it's this act that's the most infamous because it's the only act that acts directly on U.S. citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And it limits their right to their protected speech. However, the Federalists argued that it was meant to separate protected speech versus speech meant to overthrow, insult, or undermine the government.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that type of speech was not covered under the First Amendment.
I mean, listen, I'm all for freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I'm all for being able to speak your mind, and
like
even if it's an opinion or whatever, you should have the right to say what you want to say. You should not, however, have the right to print it and present it as fact.
Yeah.
If it ain't fucking true. Or at least not, like, factually, provably true.
Adams didn't promote any of these acts, but he did sign them into law. And they were kind of popular for a moment, just because the climate, it made everyone feel safe and whatnot. There were people who were convicted under the Sedition Act, but it was rarely enforced. But it seems that they got about 10 to 14 different people where reporters or newspapers were imprisoned briefly. Adams never signed any deportation order, and it didn't help or hurt the Federalists, but it strengthened the Democratic Republicans in their opposition to Adams. Like, this was probably the nail in his coffin, according to them. They really all rallied behind him, against him. Yeah. So the presidential election of 1800 rolls around, and it's also known as the Revolution of 1800. Like, that's how nasty it got.
Wow.
Because, again, newspapers can print whatever they want.
Yeah.
And, like, they're just printing just the most insane slander.
Malarkey.
And malarkey. Oh, God. It was all the same faces from the previous race. It was kind of like a rematch. So there was Jefferson and Burr on the Democratic-Republican ticket, and Adams and Pinckney on the Federalist side. Huh. But this was the first time where both parties used a congressional nominating caucus. So they're making things like a little bit more formal now.
Sure.
And they nominated a ticket.
Okay.
Like, they put forth 2 candidates, even though they would run by themselves, but they, like, had this whole, pomp thing where they sent off their 2 candidates. So this was the first time that both sides really organized smear campaigns, basically. Like, they were throwing mud back and forth at each other, but through surrogates, mostly. Like, they wouldn't do it themselves. Well, Adams would say a few things, but Jefferson hired someone to basically say everything he thought.
It's not like this message is approved by...
Well, back then, most of the candidates, they were just, like, they spent most of the election at their homes while, like, their teams just battled it out in the press.
Yeah.
So this campaign was bitter and was characterized by slander and personal attacks on both sides. Jefferson's camp accused Adams of having a hideous hermaphroditic character.
What?
Which had neither this is a quote, neither the force and firmness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman's.
What
Yes.
the fuck does that even mean?
Exactly.
Like,
Who knows? And Adams called Jefferson a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, son of a half-breed Indian squaw, sired by a Virginia mulatto father.
what the actual fuck?
Yes, quotes from both.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so they got a little nasty. They got a little bit nasty. Adams was labeled a fool, a hypocrite, a criminal, a tyrant, while Jefferson was branded a weakling, an atheist, a libertine, a coward. The key differences between the two politicians was that Jefferson, as I said, hired like a hatchet man named James Callender to do his smearing for him, whereas Adams would publish 2 different editorials and just like it would run in major papers, like all the shitty things he would say about Jefferson.
That's crazy. That's nuts.
It's so crazy. But yeah, Adams felt like he was above such tactics. He was the only founding father without slaves.
Adams?
Yeah.
Huh.
And he's the only founding father without a monument. I'm like, I feel like these two are related.
Yeah.
It's like, who does he think he is? He's too good. But Callender was really good at smearing Adams. He basically convinced the population, like the public, that Adams wanted to go to war with France, and they were just so afraid of war. Everyone was so broken and fearful that it worked. Like, they believed it, and it was 100% a lie, but it was printed throughout, It was printed everywhere, basically.
I mean, it must have been a weird time to be alive. And
Oh,
to be
yeah. I mean, it sounds, like, so unstable, so crazy, and, like, free-flowing. Like, the fact that we didn't have the Mississippi River, like, that wasn't ours.
Yeah.
And we had to, like, lease it out from Spain. It's like, how did Spain even get here? But, yeah. It's crazy.
The same way we did.
Yeah. Theft.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a very crazy time, and Republicans, the Democratic Republicans, they ultimately won more votes. But Jefferson and his VP, they tied. Burr and Jefferson tied. And the tie was broken by Alexander Hamilton, who said that, well, him and Burr had beef, like long-standing beef.
Okay.
And he basically said that he didn't trust Burr. He disagrees with Jefferson, but at least Jefferson has principles, whereas he felt Burr was like a snake, like sort of a shape-shifting political operative who had no real thoughts or leanings. So, yeah, he was the tiebreaker, and Jefferson became the president, and Burr was his VP. And then later, Burr shot Alexander Hamilton between the ribs and killed him.
NBD.
Yeah, no big deal. That there's just a sitting vice president who is a murderer who never was prosecuted, because it happened in New Jersey.
Imagine a vice president shooting someone.
But shooting and I know. So good.
Yeah.
But shooting and killing someone and then just, like, staying there, like, dude,
I mean,
he's dead.
Cheney shot somebody in the face.
The guy lives.
He lived.
It's fucked up. Yeah, no,
He
I
got
get
shot
it. In the face. You're right. That's, with, like, duck pellet.
Yeah.
But still, that's so crazy. Wow. Cheney.
Oh, what a
Cheney's
world.
still alive, right?
I believe so.
I feel like he's gonna outlive us all with his, like,
he is
robotic...
a fucking cockroach.
Yeah. But he has that, like, heart. That's like a robot
Oh,
heart.
does he?
Yeah, he
Oh,
doesn't
good
have a
for
real
him.
heart. He has,
Well,
like, a
he
mechanical...
never did.
Well, facts.
He was born without.
Born without a heart. But, okay, so my story is basically wrapped up because, Jefferson won, Burr's the VP, but Jefferson did kind of pay a price for his dirty campaigning. The James Callender, the guy that he hired to be, like, his hatchet man, he went to jail for sedition. So he served, like, 2 years of jail time, and when Jefferson won, he got out of jail.
But Jefferson never paid any price for it, or?
Callender, when he got out of jail, he was basically rolled up to Jefferson and is like, you need to help me.
Yeah.
Like, I want more money. Like, I took a hit for you and I helped you get into office. Like, what are you going to do for me? And Jefferson's like, get out of here, basically. So then Callender, he's the one who leaks the Sally Hemings scandal. Like, the fact that he was, as a 40-year-old, sleeping with a 14-year-old, like, slave girl.
Oh.
And that she had 5 of his children.
No big deal.
Yeah. But it was the guy that he hired leaked that just because he wouldn't pay up.
To be
spiteful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
There was no, like, the government didn't step in and be like, you can't like lie about your opponents and get away with it and still get elected.
Oh, so this Sedition Act didn't apply to politicians. So that's how they were able to get around, like, that's how the two of them were able to get around lying and just saying crazy, weird things about each other being hermaphrodites.
That's so weird.
So
I mean,
weird.
it's real.
It's, like, such a weird thing to say. Like, how is, like, okay, clearly you're just mad. Yeah,
like, you fucking 10 years old? Like, get a grip.
Yeah. 12 years after this vicious election of 1800, Jefferson and Adams began writing each other again. They became pen pals. They became friends. And they actually died on the same day, on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which to me sounds like they made a suicide pact. Like, what are the odds that they both died, like, hours from each other?
Yeah.
Like, maybe they mailed poison to each other. But yeah, that's pure speculation. That's from Stephanie. Don't come for me. But yeah, the end of my story. The end. I'm gonna finish my cocktail.
Yeah, I'm gonna fix myself another cocktail, and we'll be back in it shortly. What a weird country this is.
I know, but there's just so many parallels to what's happening today.
Like, it feels so different, and yet there are also these strange parallels.
Yeah.
It's
so
incredible.
It is incredible.
That is so incredible.
I wanted to find something topical, but also super old, because I like the vintage stories.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun to sort of try and get as far away as you can from current politics, and yet still be able to find parallels.
Yeah. Like, so many parallels.
My story will be much more current. I'm going to bring it back to episode 1 for a second.
Ooh. Is it about Ohio?
Well, not directly, but... in episode 1, I'm talking about Ed Schrock, as you may remember.
Oh yeah, Schrock for cock.
Yeah.
How can I
I actually never mentioned that in episode 1.
Oh!
That my file name for my the document that I was working off of was Schrock for cock. But so I mentioned Ed Schrock, and when I was talking about how he had a 92% rating from the Christian Coalition, I said at the time he was only second to one person.
Some other horrible asshole.
Yeah, Dennis Hastert.
Oh, yes! Oh, he's bad.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, so I knew that the name Dennis Hastert sounded familiar.
Yeah, I don't know
but
specifically
I couldn't place who he was.
He's always around, like, bad things. It's never in a positive.
Well, we're about to find out just how bad. So I was actually listening to My Favorite Murder.
Oh.
And his name came up just briefly. They weren't doing an episode about him, but his name briefly came up, and I was like, that's why I know.
Seriously, you know him
from something
My
that he
Favorite
did
Murder?
that they were discussing.
Oh.
No, they were just discussing something that he is known for, which I'm about to get into. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, I feel silly for mentioning his name so casually in episode 1 and not even mentioning the fact that he is the man that I'm about to tell you about. But I'm also going to say that I don't know what goes on at the Christian Coalition.
Fuckery.
But I feel like anyone with a rating that high from the Christian Coalition is so pious on the surface for a reason.
Oh, 100%.
Because they're hiding something.
Yeah, definitely.
And
There's some skeletons.
if somebody has a high ass rate, like an over 90% rating from the Christian Coalition, somebody needs to do a deep dive and figure out what the fuck they're hiding, because there is a reason that this motherfucker.
What does Bachman have, I wonder?
I know.
I mean, I've seen
There's
her
so many,
husband,
yeah.
so I'm...
Before I get into this story, I'm gonna warn people.
Oh, what?
This gets really dark.
Trigger warning.
This is a really dark story, and it may be difficult for some people to hear.
Well, can I leave?
No, sit
You
down.
say.
You can't go anywhere. You have to listen. No,
Just
this is
rocking
going to be
in a fetal position at the end of this.
Yeah, this is really rough. So I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
But I feel like this is a story that if you don't know already.
Yeah. The fact that I don't know about him and I like.
And this is a recent, like,
Yeah.
the things that he did happened a long time ago, but
Okay.
they came to light very recently.
Okay.
Whoa.
Oh.
So I'm sorry for those of you with a sensitive stomach.
Yeah.
I'll say this gets a little dark. I'll warn you again. If you're listening to this
Glad I
with
have my
children,
sangaree.
why are you listening to this with children?
Seriously.
Because we
Do
say
better.
the fuck word like all the time. But I'll warn you again before we get into the really gross stuff.
Oh, God. Okay.
Denny Hastert.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry, that was the gross stuff.
Yeah, no. Thank you. I thought you were going to warn me.
Yeah. So Denny Hastert was born John Dennis Hastert on January 2nd, 1942 in Aurora, Illinois. He was married in 1973 and had 2 children. From 1964 to 1980, he was a history teacher and a wrestling and football coach at Yorkville High School in Illinois.
Uh-oh.
He was named Illinois Coach of the Year after leading his wrestling team to the state championship. But then he left high school history and coaching in 1980 to get into politics. He started as like a
In
Illinois state senator or state congressman, something.
Yeah.
Eventually, by 1999, he was elected the 51st Speaker of the House, replacing Newt Gingrich in 1999.
Really?
Yeah. He's actually the longest serving Republican Speaker of the House in history. And many people blame...
I remember Newt. I don't remember him.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, I watched CNN. I was a weird child. But I would watch Wolf Blitzer.
Really?
Like in the 90s, talk about Desert Storm. And like, even then, as like a preteen, I'm just like, this guy's an alarmist. Like, don't listen to this man.
Yeah. Well, which is why you knew who Joe Biden was.
Yes,
and
yes.
I didn't.
100%. I love Joe. Go on, I'm sorry.
Many people actually blame Hastert and Gingrich together because they were, consecutive.
Okay. Side note, can I tell you that I don't know if I...
Yes! I know the story, but you should tell everyone else. I know the story.
So, I, again, was such a weird child, a very nerdy, political child. I had a Newt named Gingrich. And my sister killed him. She let him out of the cage, and I came back home from school, and he was just, like, dried out on my floor. So, R.I.P. Newt.
What a feckless
I miss
cunt.
you. Yeah. But go on, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So many people blame Dennis Hastert and Newt Gingrich together, but more Hastert because he served longer. For a lot of the current dysfunction in American politics, especially congressional politics, until the story that I'm about to tell, he was best known for a parliamentary tactic that bears his name, the Hastert Rule, which many people blame for... What's that?
Filibustering?
No, not filibustering.
Oh, okay.
It's sort of... Well, we'll get there.
Okay.
So many people blame the Hastert Rule for today's sort of agree to never agree mood in Washington. And so the Hastert Rule basically is that rather than trying to appeal to the other side of the aisle for bipartisanship and bipartisan support of new legislation, the idea was that the Hastert rule is also called the majority of the majority rule. So basically, since Republicans were the majority at the time, they would only rely on other Republican votes to pass a bill.
Yes.
And bills would only reach the floor if they knew beforehand that they had enough Republican votes to get
pass.
Yeah.
So that was his doing.
Yes,
like
this is
just
Hastert.
Organizing behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he had help from people at Gingrich, but this
so
came
wait,
to
when did Gingrich step down?
99 was when Hastert took over.
Took
for
over
Gingrich.
99. Okay.
Yeah. So this happened. This is like 99, early 2000s. That this rule. I mean, this has been a long time coming. This whole Republicans hating Democrats so much that we won't agree on anything.
Yeah.
But this official policy of I'm not even going to put anything forward unless I know beforehand.
That everyone is I already have the votes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't need to even try to get any support from a different party.
Majority, got it.
Yeah. That's what Hastert was best known for when he was a politician. He, after 20 years in office, he left Congress in 2008 and landed a high-powered lobbying gig.
I was about to say, what company
Yes,
is
he's
he
a
lobbying
lobbyist.
for? Yeah.
Senior advisor at the firm Dick Stein Shapiro. And after getting out of politics, he said, there is no Hastert rule.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh, what a liar.
It was more of a principle that the majority power should follow its own policies.
I like that this guy isn't a lawyer. He's just like some wrestling coach.
Yeah.
But he's
history teacher. He was a history teacher.
Oh, that's right. He's a history teacher. Okay.
Yeah.
But he's arguing semantics like he's a lawyer.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay.
Gingrich, after Hastert stepped down, Gingrich said that the practice was, quote, simply common sense.
Oh! Fuck you. However, Gingrich now is not the worst.
Well, because we have worse now. I mean, look.
Damn it! I'm like, yeah, maybe that's what it is.
He's still terrible.
Yeah.
100%.
$100%.
But
I'm
we're talking
not saying that he's a good human.
He has not gotten any better.
Yeah.
The people in power now are just worse than.
No, but I think he's slightly gotten a little bit better just because he was in a 13th.
That's true. He was.
Yeah, and he was spilling all the Republican tea. He's like, yeah, we do this in the South because we know that whites hate blacks. And it's just like, do your friends know that you're telling all your secrets?
I wondered when I saw him on the 13th. I was wondering what his aim was. If he was trying to sort of spin it.
I just assume he's been he's out of politics. He's so old that he's just whatever. Come for me. I have no power. I can tell the truth now.
Yeah.
But yeah, back then he was 100%. Yeah, still.
I don't necessarily think that just because he's telling the truth that makes him any better.
But
because he doesn't. I don't think he's saying that because he thinks he's wrong.
No, but I think in the 90s, if someone was to ask him,
he would not have.
100%.
That has more to do with
it's
the consequences of being a politician that tells the truth.
Yeah.
But now he's at a position where he can be like, yeah, I did the shit.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, no, you're right. He didn't seem repentant, I shouldn't have done this.
Exactly.
It was just
it was very matter of fact.
So I guess just the times have changed so he can speak openly.
His times have changed.
100%.
He is no longer a politician, so he doesn't need to try and hide it.
He's not up for election. No one's going to. He doesn't need to cater to voters.
Yeah.
So he can tell the truth.
Yeah. Okay, so Hastert left Congress in 2008 after 20 years in office.
Okay.
He had stepped into this position as a lobbyist in 2008 and then was a lobbyist from 2008 until, in 2014, a bank in his hometown of Yorkville, Illinois, noticed a series of suspicious withdrawals from his account.
Oh, no.
And a bank officer told him that withdrawals of more than $10,000 would have to be reported to federal regulators.
Oh, they were more than $10,000, these withdrawals.
Well, so they weren't.
Oh.
Because he knew that if they
so
were
it's
over
like
10,000...
9.
Exactly.
Oh, how... Like, at least do, like, 7.
So in 2014, the bank started noticing that Hastert had taken out a series of $9,000 cash increments over, I think, over 4.5...
That is so...
Yeah.
He's doing crime wrong.
Seriously. Get a grip, man. Yes.
Do crime better. Like...
Yeah. So after investigating, they realized that he had taken over $1.7 million out.
Wait.
$1.7 million.
When did he start doing this again?
It was discovered in 2014, but he had been doing it for over 4.5 years. Taking out $9,000 increments over 4.5 years. So in December, the bank reported it to the FBI, and in December, the FBI confronted Hastert and said, what's going on with all this money? What are you doing with this 1.7?
I mean, clearly you're doing something illegal because duh.
Yeah. So they confront Hastert, and Hastert says, well, I just don't trust banks. And
that's cute.
He was, quote, trying to keep his money safe.
Damn, that's like such a good argument for like a Republican, you know? It's just because what you're doing is not technically illegal.
Yeah.
But it's suspicious. I mean, it's clearly you're up to no good, but like that is the response.
Yeah.
That you get.
Well, I just don't trust banks.
Yeah.
But then,
it's
obviously...
like I'm crazy like Alex Jones.
Yes, yeah.
I'm buying gold.
But the FBI pressed him on it, and eventually his attorney told the FBI that Hastert was a victim of extortion, and he would cooperate with their investigation.
Oh.
So he was paying somebody who was blackmailing him, and that's why he was taking...
He paid them like $1 million.
Yes.
Oh, they must have had such delicious...
So he claimed that the extortionist, that the claims were unfounded, but just because he had been a politician and because he was well respected, he just didn't want anyone to hear it.
But he was out of politics at this point.
He was out of politics at this point, but this is bad.
Oh, okay.
This is bad.
Got it, okay.
So he claimed that these allegations were unfounded, but he just wanted to keep it out of the public.
That's a lot of money to be paying for some lies. Okay.
So he claimed that a former student from when he was a wrestling coach identified in court documents only as individual A had falsely accused him of sexual abuse when he was a coach and was blackmailing him. The FBI agents asked him to call individual A on and record it so that they could catch the individual A blackmailing him, extorting him, and making threats and all this stuff. But
that's such an obvious lie,
though. So it didn't take long for the FBI to figure out that Hastert was the one that was lying.
Yeah.
And
because for one person to request that amount of money, like no, dude. Again, he's doing crime wrong.
Yeah. So then the FBI goes to individual A.
Oh.
And asks him what was going on. Because after this phone call, they heard the whole phone call and they were like, okay, someone's lying. It's clearly Hastert. Let's figure out what this other person has to say about it and what's going on. So according to individual A, when he was 14 years old, any children in the room should pause this, turn it off, get kids out of the room. If you're queasy, don't listen to this. This is not good.
It's like Sally Hemings all over again.
When he was 14 years old, Hastert touched him in a motel room on a wrestling trip under the guise of massaging a pulled groin muscle.
Oh.
Because he was a wrestler, and he was the wrestling coach, and he had individual A at a match had pulled his groin.
Okay.
Told his coach, and then because they were out of town on a match, he invited individual A to his hotel room to say, like, I'll massage your groin since you pulled your groin.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's his coach, so he says yes. And then bad stuff happened. And
I'm so torn about this because when you're an athlete, you're always getting injured. It's just I know that this doesn't happen all the time, but it's just like, who do you go to with your injuries?
Well, that's exactly it, too. You're talking about a well-respected
Yeah.
Coach of the Year,
Yeah.
Illinois Coach of the Year.
I mean, look at the gymnast scandals.
Yeah.
Like, all those Olympic gymnasts who have been, like, molested for decades.
Yeah. Well, and this kid's 14 years old at the
Yeah.
time, so, like, who's going to believe you?
Yeah.
Who went on to, at the time was Illinois Coach of the Year and well-respected history teacher, to go on to be the longest-serving Republican
Yeah.
Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? What are you
Yeah.
going to say?
Yeah, what are you going to say? Nothing.
So anyways, fast forward to May 28th of 2015. Federal officials indicted Hastert for unlawfully structuring bank withdrawals to avoid bank reporting requirements.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
And for making false statements to the FBI about the purpose of his withdrawals. The Justice Department figured that he had paid Individual A a total of $1.7 million so far, out of a $3.5 million agreement to compensate for and conceal prior misconduct. $3.5 million.
Wait, this is a lawsuit that he lost and had to pay?
No, this was like a agreement that Hastert had come to with Individual A.
Yeah.
There was never, it's not legal.
Oh, so this is outside the court.
Yes, this is completely outside the court. Basically, Hastert, Individual A had gone to Hastert and been like, you fucking motherfucker.
Yeah.
Fucked me up. I was a kid. You did this to me. I'm fucked up because of it. And
Yeah,
I'm going to tell
obviously.
everyone if you don't give me money.
Yeah.
And Hastert agreed to pay him $3.5 million to keep it quiet. And after 4.5 years of paying him in $9,000 increments, the bank figured it out, reported it to the FBI. And that's why Hastert was caught, because of the way he was structuring these bank withdrawals.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously illegal transactions.
Yes. But so he had only paid him $1.7 million out of $3.5 that they had agreed on.
Yeah.
He was paying him in small increments so that he could not tell the federal government what the purpose of the withdrawals was. After the indictment, accusations emerged that Hastert had abused at least
it's never one.
Huh?
It's never one. It's never one person that they...
Yeah.
It's like getting one tattoo, like it doesn't happen.
No, exactly. So he had allegedly abused at least 4 other teen boys in the 1960s and 70s, but couldn't be prosecuted for the sexual abuse because of statute of limitations.
Oh.
The statute of limitations had run out decades earlier.
Yeah.
So it was never directly mentioned in his indictment.
Damn.
He was only indicted on structuring and lying to the FBI. Hastert was released on $4,500 bail, and CBS Chicago reported that Hastert had privately told close friends...
$4,500?
$4,500.
So $0.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, because what do you pay? You actually pay like a 10% of that, so he had to pay $450 to get out.
Wow.
Yeah. CBS Chicago reported that Hastert had privately told close friends, "I am a victim too. You're the victim.
I am a victim too.
Mm-hmm. You're the victim."
Oh, what a twisted world he lives in.
June of
he is the victim.
Yeah, he's the victim because he got caught.
Oh, his good name.
Yeah, exactly. June of 2015, Jolene Reinbold Burge went on Good Morning America to say that her late brother, Steve Reinbold, was the equipment manager for the wrestling team at Yorkville High School when Hastert was the coach. Steve, had told Jolene that after graduating in 1971, that Hastert had sexually abused him all throughout high school, and that he had never told anyone because he didn't think that they'd believe him. Jolene said...
he's a child.
Yeah.
This man is powerful, and, he's getting all these awards and accolades. So, yeah, it's so terrible.
Yeah.
But understandable. He wouldn't go.
So
no
Jolene said that Hastert, quote, damaged Steve, I think, more than any of us will ever know. Steve Reinbold died of an AIDS-related illness in 1995, and Hastert attended his viewing.
No.
And Jolene said, quote, I was just there just trying to bite my tongue, thinking that blood was coming out. So after he had gone through the line, I followed him out into the parking lot of the funeral home. I said, I want to know why you did what you did to my brother. And he just stood there and stared at me. He didn't say, what are you talking about? You know, what? I don't know what you're talking about. He just stood there and stared at me. And she said this on Good Morning America.
Yeah.
So Jolene went on to say, I want you to know your secret didn't die in there with my brother.
Oh, yeah.
And I want you to remember that I'm out here and that I know. And again, he just stood there and he did not say a word. He just got in his car and left. Oh, I also want to mention, Steve Reinvolt was not individual A. This is a different kid.
Oh, yeah. For wrestling, like from the high school.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
June 9th, 2015, Hastert's arraignment hearing lasted about 20 minutes.
This is for the fraud.
It's for structuring.
Yeah.
Criminal structuring and lying to the FBI.
Okay.
He entered a plea of not guilty.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh.
U.S. District Judge Thomas M. Durkin disclosed at the arraignment that he had contributed to Hastert's congressional campaigns on multiple occasions.
So he recused himself.
Well, so basically what he was saying was like, I supported Hastert when he was a politician, but he said he had never met Hastert and that, quote, I have no doubt that I can be impartial in this matter.
Whatever.
I
Get
am
outta
not
here.
naive enough to think that a reasonable person would not question my impartiality, but both parties filed notices waiving any objection to Durkin presiding over the case.
Okay, I don't know why.
But he was the one that was like, I'm going to be impartial. I did contribute to his campaign.
I guess he outed himself.
Yes. He
But
came
still,
forward.
I would want him gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So he's doing the right things.
He's basically like, I'm a conservative, I am a Republican, so I thought that I supported this guy, but now that I know what's going on,
Yeah.
fuck this dude.
But does he even really know what's going on at this point, or he just knows that he's?
I'm not
paying-
sure what he knows.
Yeah. He knows that obviously there's some illegal
Yes.
financial transactions
Yes.
happening.
He does
and that
find
he
out.
lied. Oh, he does.
He
find
does.
out.
It does come to light. Everything comes to light.
But this
in
is
the court.
after he tells the court that, like, hey, I gave this guy money.
He may have only been thinking about the FBI stuff and the
Yeah.
structuring. But either way, he just said, look, I did support Hastert,
Okay.
but I'm still impartial. I'm still a judge, and I'm going to do my job.
Okay.
And both parties were like, okay, you can be the judge. It's fine. So later in 2015, in October, Hastert took a plea deal. He appeared in court to plead guilty to the felony structuring charge, but the FBI dropped the making a false statement charge.
Okay, just because he pleaded guilty.
Yes.
To the higher
So that
charge.
was that was his plea deal. Was like,
Okay.
you'll get one, but we'll drop the
We'll
other.
drop the other. Okay.
Right, almost immediately after he pleads guilty to structuring, he has a stroke. And he's hospitalized. And he's also treated for sepsis and back surgeries. He has 2 back surgeries. Yeah.
That's a lot of, like...
Yeah. But he's an old man at this point. I mean, you think he was a high school football coach in the 60s. And then we're talking 2015.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he's an old man.
Okay, he's
when,
an old man.
when this is all happening.
Damn, sepsis, though. That's
Yeah.
like, you could die from that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then the prosecutors were like, he's going to use this to his advantage to get his sentence reduced.
Yeah. But it's not like he faked the stroke. He's just an old man.
No, totally. But they're
Yeah.
like, he's going to ask
Yeah.
for a reduced sentence.
Yeah.
Because
he's so sick.
Exactly.
He's an ailing...
Yeah.
Okay.
So sentencing was postponed, and Judge Durkin ordered a medical expert to review Hastert's health. And like I said, the prosecution was worried that he'd get sympathy, so they release a 26-page filing ahead of sentencing, publicly alleging sexual misconduct for the first time in this case,
Okay.
saying that he had molested at least 4 boys as young as 14, and they detailed specific graphic incidents and sexual acts.
Wow.
And they requested that Hastert have to undergo a sex offender evaluation to comply with his recommended treatment. So, again, this is dark and shitty, and if, brace yourselves. I'm going to read an excerpt from the filing from the prosecution. When it was time for bed, Individual A went to defendant's motel room. Earlier in the trip, Individual A had complained about a groin pull. While in the motel room, defendant asked about Individual A's injuries and said that he wanted to check on it. Defendant told Individual A to lie down on the bed and take off his underwear. Defendant then began massaging Individual A's groin area. It became clear to Individual A that the defendant was not touching him in a therapeutic manner to address a wrestling injury, but was touching him in an inappropriate sexual way. A few moments later, Individual A jumped off the bed, grabbed his underwear, and ran across the room to slouch in a chair. Individual A was confused and embarrassed about his physical reaction to defendant's contact with him, and he apologized to defendant. Defendant then asked Individual A to get on defendant's back and give him a massage.
What?
Individual A was nervous about what had happened and what was going on and did not know what to do. Defendant lay on the bed in only his underwear, and Individual A gave him a back massage. They then went to sleep in the same bed.
Okay. That's horrifying.
It's so,
so manipulative.
Yeah, to give to this poor
it's
kid.
I'm gonna help you.
Yeah.
But clearly, the kid's not a dummy. It's this is not therapeutic.
But also, he's 14 and he doesn't know how to react. He got an erection and what are you gonna,
14-year-olds get erections from the wind.
And then he apologized to Hastert.
He's an authority figure.
Yeah, but then to go on and be like, well, why don't you give me a massage?
Yeah.
Get on my back. I'm gonna get in my underwear. That's so fucking...
Yeah, that's crazy. That's so disgusting.
Hastert's defense attorneys asked for probation instead of jail time, saying that Hastert was, quote, deeply sorry for his actions.
He's so
and that
sorry.
his remorse was emotional and heartfelt.
Fuck that man for life.
Heartfelt. Oh, but he's a victim too. Don't forget.
Yes. It's amazing that people don't choke on their words.
The defense released a statement saying, quote, Mr. Hastert acknowledges that as a young man he committed transgressions for which he is profoundly sorry. He earnestly apologizes to his former students. Earnestly.
Oh, okay.
To his former students, family, friends, previous constituents, and all others affected by the harm his actions may have caused. Fuck your constituents, motherfucker. You clearly don't get who you need to be apologizing to.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I'm sorry that I got caught and you voted for me, and I'm a fucking...
I'm a monster. It's so twisted.
60 letters of leniency for Hastert were submitted to the court ahead of sentencing.
Who did this? Who are these 60 people?
Several from current or former members of Congress, as well as local leaders, board members, police officers, and, quote, several members of the Illinois wrestling community. Literally. What the fuck?
What? Wow.
I'm
very confused by
I'm almost less confused by the congressman because, clearly these people have no spines.
No, I mean, they're team whatever, team red.
Yeah.
So they're not thinking about it. But the wrestling community.
Several members of the Illinois wrestling community. April of 2016, 2 days before Hastert's sentencing, Individual A sues Hastert for breach of contract, attempting to collect the remaining $1.8 million of the $3.5 million hush money agreement that they had come to. He alleged he had suffered panic attacks and other problems as a result of the abuse, and that as compensation he deserved the money he was promised to keep quiet.
Yeah.
Hastert counterclaimed that he should be paid back all of the money he'd already paid Individual A so far, as well as legal fees.
Oh, that's petty.
Yeah, because Individual A had violated their verbal agreement by talking to the federal authorities.
Okay, so he's not denying the fact that he is a sexual predator who's ruined this man's life.
He's saying that even though
you should have shut your mouth.
The FBI had questioned this now man,
yeah,
that he shouldn't have opened his mouth. So he's not denying that they had this agreement.
Yeah.
He's just denying that he should have to keep paying it.
Oh, well, let's see how that works out for him.
Yeah. Well, so actually, this lawsuit, it was filed in 2016, but it's still ongoing.
Oh, okay.
It's they've never reached an agreement. The attorney
It's civil.
Yeah. Well, so the individual A's attorney suggested that the case would likely be resolved by a settlement out of court.
Yeah.
But as of yet, the case has not been settled, and the last article I could find was from January of 2018. So if anyone listening has an update or has heard anything, if you know individual A, if you're Dennis Hastert's kids, 2 days before this lawsuit, the government presented 2 witnesses at the sentencing hearing. I'm a sangaree and a half in, and I can no longer speak.
Yeah, I'm 2 in, so.
So Jolene Burge, the Steve Reinbold's sister, the one that was on Good Morning America, she read a letter at the sentencing that her brother had written shortly before his death in 1995. Addressing Hastert, she said that she wanted to, quote, hold you accountable for sexually abusing my brother. I knew your secret, and you couldn't bribe or intimidate your way out of it. You think you can deny your abuse of Steve because he can no longer speak for himself. That's why I'm here. She said that her brother had felt betrayed, ashamed, and embarrassed by what had happened to him, and that his life has deteriorated after the abuse, leading him down a path of high-risk, reckless behavior that ultimately cost him his life. She said, quote, you took his life, Mr. Hastert, not because he died of AIDS, but because you took his innocence and turned it against him. He was too young and vulnerable to understand that. The FBI's the prosecution's second witness was individual D, who eventually was publicly identified. He publicly identified
where's
himself.
B and C?
They're in there too, but they're less sort of vocal.
Oh, okay.
They don't talk about them much in the papers. But individual D publicly identified himself as Scott Cross for the first time in court. And he told the court that he had looked up to Coach Hastert and he had been a key figure in his life. One day after practice, he had stayed late and Hastert offered him a massage.
Oh, the massage.
While he was lying on the training table in the gym, at the school's gym, Hastert pulled his shorts down and touched him in a sexual way.
So bold to do that, just like in the gym.
At the school gym, yeah.
Whoa.
Because he was training at school and stayed late after class to train. So anyways, Hastert, for the sentencing hearing, shows up to court in a wheelchair, clearly trying to get sympathy, which is why...
Did he have the neck brace?
He didn't have a neck brace. Not that I know of. You never know.
I feel like he needs a neck brace with his wheelchair.
Yeah.
It should be a package deal.
So he reads from a written statement saying that he is...
Fuck this man forever, but go on.
No, seriously, literally...
Just no.
Literally fuck this man
reject
forever.
all of this.
He is, quote, deeply ashamed
Oh, yes.
to be in court.
Oh, wait.
Yes.
Deeply
ashamed.
I hate non-apology
I know.
apologies. It's like
I know.
a pet peeve of mine. It's like, I'm sorry
I'm
that
sorry
your
that
feelings
I got
hurt.
caught.
Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry that you feel this way.
Exactly. Like, I'm not sorry about what I did.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm sorry you're such a fucking pussy that you can't take it. My shitty behavior. Okay, go on. I'm sorry.
No, don't be
Wow.
sorry. You are
I'm
correct.
So rude.
Deeply ashamed to be in court and was, quote, still struggling to come to terms with events that occurred 4 decades earlier.
I'm sorry.
He said he had mistreated some of my athletes that I coached. Mistreated. That's putting it mildly, to say the least.
Mistreated.
Mm-hmm. Back to Judge Durkin, the one who had contributed to Hastert's campaigns.
Yes.
Judge Durkin put pressure on Hastert to address the sexual abuse. And at first, he claimed that he didn't remember abusing Scott Cross.
Oh, so old.
Quote, but, quote, I accept his statement.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Later in the trial, though, he said, I want to apologize to the boys I mistreated when I was their coach. What I did was wrong and I regret it. So Judge Durkin repeatedly referred to Hastert as a serial child molester.
Oh, as he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And said...
So he's calling him by his name.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So Durkin calls him a serial child molester and said, quote, "Some actions can obliterate a lifetime of good works."
Oh, his good works.
Yeah. Nothing is more stunning than having the words serial child molester and Speaker of the House in the same sentence.
Well, it's true.
Yeah.
You were both of those things.
Yeah.
So, it is stunning, I guess. But it's you.
I mean, because clearly Judge Durkin wants to be a good judge, wants to be impartial, but also is a conservative Republican and wants the Republican Party to remain untarnished. So he's trying to separate Hastert's good works, quote, good works, from his naughtiness.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Naughtiness.
So Hastert is sentenced to 15 months in prison. 15 months. But he's only going to prison for the structuring charges because, again, all of this stuff, the statute of limitations had expired years earlier, decades earlier, which is fucked up. There should not be a statute of limitations
really
on
shouldn't.
sexual,
No.
Especially child molestation,
there shouldn't
but sexual
be.
abuse at all.
Yeah.
There's no reason for
there's
there to
no
be a
reason.
fucking... Why is there there's no statute of limitations on murder?
No.
Why is there a statute of limitation on fucking child abuse, child
Rape.
molestation,
Yeah.
any molestation, any sexual abuse? It's bullshit.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's like, I think it's because they really just don't want to do rape kits ever. But it's fucked up. And I agree, there shouldn't be a
They
statute.
find any reason not to process a rape kit,
Yeah.
whether statute of limitations
Yeah.
expired or not. They
Yeah.
would find any excuse not
Yeah.
to process a rape
There are
kit.
people there are victims who've had to pay for their rape
Which
kits
is
to be proc.
insane.
This is the world we live in.
Anyway, so legally he's only convicted for the structuring charge.
Okay.
Sentenced to 15 months in prison.
Which is bullshit.
He's also ordered to pay $250,000 to a sexual victims fund.
Why?
Which is, it's weird because
Because it's like, we're not convicting you on the sex charges. However, you need to pay these people.
But I think that because he took a plea, the prosecution was able to work that in.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because they basically were like, if you don't go along with it, we're going to... I mean, they released all the stuff anyways. I don't really know... But I guess they were like, if you don't go along with it and talk about what actually happened, we're going to throw the book at you. And you know what I mean? The FBI is really going to come after you. And you could go to prison for much longer than you did.
Yeah, 15 months is nothing.
Is nothing. But so he's ordered to serve 2 years of supervised release once he finishes his prison sentence and enter a sex offender treatment program. Since his sentencing, at least one other additional victim has come forward. But again, statute of limitations.
Yeah.
He tried to sue, but he doesn't have a case. So the Chicago Tribune editorial board praised, quote, "the bravery of the victims and their families who confronted the man who was once second in line to be president.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. The enduring impact is that the truth has been revealed, and for as long as the name Dennis Hastert is recalled, the man once respected as the leader will now be known as a criminal, a scoundrel, and a child molester."
Yeah. Pedophile.
Yeah. The New York Times columnist Frank Bruni wrote that Hastert's case underscored the danger that comes with the quickness and frequency with which so many of us equate displays of religious devotion with actual rectitude, noting that Hastert's public displays of Christian faith during his time in office were a factor in his colleagues' assessment of him as a safe, uncontroversial figure. Bruni also critiqued the testimonials that prominent Republicans submitted on Hastert's behalf before sentencing, saying
Shame
that...
on them.
Yeah, I mean, literally.
I mean, they have no shame, but if
But
they were
fuck
to
you.
have shame,
Fuck you.
shame on you.
Yeah. Saying that they affirm the degree to which pacts rather than principle govern partisan politics today.
Yeah, duh.
The Post called for extending statutes of limitations in sex abuse cases to give victims more time to come forward and
Or
prosecutors
just
more
as
time
much
to...
time, there should be no statute.
There should be no statute
There
of
should be
limitations.
none.
But if nothing else, it should be extended. But it shouldn't...
Extended 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, literally.
Like, let's
Yeah.
just...
So after serving 13 months of his 15-month sentence at the Federal Medical Center Prison in Rochester, Minnesota, where he was sent because he was elderly and sick.
Yeah.
So he didn't even go to prison. He went to a medical prison.
I mean,
it's still prison, but
it's still prison, and he's old.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, I think it should have been so much longer.
Yeah.
15 months is literally nothing.
Yeah. So he serves 13 months and is released on July 18th, 2017, and placed under the supervision of a residential reentry management field office in Chicago. Mr. Cross, the individual D, Scott Cross, said that his short sentence and release to a halfway house was a, quote, slap on the wrist.
Yeah, it was.
He was charged with a financial crime, not what he had actually done to myself and others back in the 70s. And Jolene Burge said, quote, I feel as much justice has been done that the law will allow. Was it enough? I don't think so. But from my point of view, after 20 or 30 years of knowing that what he had done to my brother, I never thought he would ever get caught, so I'm okay with this. It's a pretty big fall from grace.
Okay. I mean, she realizes the climate
Totally.
and the atmosphere, and she has realistic goals.
Well, and the fact that
it's bullshit,
there's a statute of limitations on child abuse and sexual abuse. Yeah. After his release, court ordered restrictions banned Hastert from having contact with anyone under the age of 18, quote, except in the presence of a responsible adult who is aware of the nature of his background and current offense. He's also not allowed to possess any pornographic, sexually oriented, or sexually stimulating materials.
So he just doesn't have the internet?
He's not basically.
Oh, okay.
He's not allowed to.
He has no phone. He has a flip phone.
Well, so he's not allowed to access the internet without supervision.
Oh, okay.
And he must get approval from the probation officer before accessing any device with internet access, and must provide copies of telephone bills, credit card receipts, and other financial information to probation officials at their request.
I like that his life is being ruined.
I mean,
way.
literally.
Yeah.
He's
good.
Even though he's released.
Good.
He's still.
Yeah.
He's like in what do you call it? House arrest, basically.
Yeah.
Without the internet, because they're like, no, you're a fucking child molester. You're gonna
But maybe he's so old that he doesn't even care about the internet.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't
you know
matter.
What I mean?
It makes
At this
me
point,
feel better that he has no life.
Whether or not he even has any sort of sexual drive left in him, whether or not that's true, he's still a fucking child molester, and I don't care if this shit happened in the 60s or 70s.
Oh, 100%.
Or 3 days ago.
No, I just want him to be punished, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he has no access, because if he was, our age, that would be a real punishment.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm glad that...
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, maybe he doesn't even care about not having...
I hope he
access.
cares, though. I hope he cares, and I hope he's in agony.
Yeah.
Because, he got off 15 months or 13 months. Get out of here. That's nothing.
The only sort of, the one good thing that kind of came out of this, other than the fact that he went to prison and has now had his life and reputation ruined, the one sort of nice thing that has come out of this is that the Illinois State Senate unanimously voted in March of 2017 to eliminate the statute of limitations for all felony child abuse and sexual assault offenses.
Amazing.
In Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a step.
Massive.
Yeah.
That's amazing for everyone who lives in Illinois. Let's move to Illinois.
Yeah. Nope.
I mean,
Nope.
We're not children. But still, that's good. That's positive.
Not just any sexual assault offenses. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It says all felony child abuse and sexual assault offenses.
Damn. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's a net positive.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks that it's just Illinois. This should be federal, but maybe we'll get there in the future.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's
Who
good.
knows?
That's really, really good. Okay. So it wasn't all a down.
I mean, it's just Illinois because they're trying to fucking hide their shame at this point, but
whatever gets them to do the right thing, I'm okay with it.
Whether you have to be exposed
I'm okay
as
with it.
Yeah.
If this is what it takes, I guess something positive came out of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry that was dark.
It was really dark.
It was hard it's hard to talk about.
Yeah. Ugh.
But
I'm glad I know now about Dennis Hastert, because I was familiar with him as a politician, but I didn't know Like, I knew that he was Republican. I knew that he was extremely conservative, but that was... I think I did hear some sort of scandal, but, like, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
Yeah.
So...
I probably would not have talked about this if I hadn't mentioned his name in episode 1.
Oh.
But when I found out...
So you already knew?
No, I mentioned his name because I said the only person with a higher rating than Schrock was Dennis Hastert. But that's all I said.
And that's all you knew?
That's all I knew.
Yeah.
I knew that the name Dennis Hastert had sounded familiar, but I couldn't remember why.
Same. Yeah.
So... But then when I put it together, I was like, oh my god, I'm such a dummy for fucking casually mentioning that name in a political scandal podcast.
Oh, yeah, true.
And not saying anything about the fact that that name is also tied to a horrible scandal. Horrible. Much worse than Schrock. At least the men...
worse.
At least
they
Schrock was, like, consensual. Yeah. They were all adults.
Yeah. Yeah, I really think that we should just look at everyone that they've ever rated. And just like,
literally, we could. There's probably a year plus worth of material if you just look at
anyone above 75.
I know. I mean, even who is the Christian Coalition? Like, who's the leadership of the Christian Coalition? You know what I mean? Like, even if they're not politicians.
I don't know hands.
Yes, that is true. Let the record show.
I'm that emoji
it's that emoji, the shrug emoji. That P.S. I love that emoji.
Me
but
too.
I can't. Who can actually type that with the characters to type it out?
Oh, yeah.
I prefer the typed out version of it over the emoji.
Yeah, the emoji is great, but the typed out version is like a level above.
It's so much more effective.
Yeah, it is.
So anytime I want to use it, I have to Google it,
copy and paste
it. Because I don't know the characters that go into it, but it's so effective.
Yeah, it is.
It's much more effective than the emoji.
I used to do that prior to the emoji.
Yeah. I don't think the emoji has the strength of
but it's still something.
It's so much bigger.
It's still something. It's huge.
Because it's so many characters strung together.
Yeah.
I think that's why I think it's more powerful, because it's so much longer.
It is, and it is more powerful.
Yeah.
It's so good.
But that's the nerd that's like, I'm a 35-year-old man who can't remember the actual characters, so every time I want to use it, which is pretty frequently, I copy and paste.
It's real good, yeah.
I have to Google that shit.
I'm a nerd, but I'm a lazy nerd, so I've just switched over to the emoji. It's not the same.
We do sound like dinosaurs.
Perhaps.
Is that a fax machine in your corner?
Yes.
She does not have a fax machine.
I do not have a fax machine.
I do love a fax machine emoji in texts.
What?
I use the fax machine.
You're the
emoji.
worst.
But it's like just to be like, this is completely nonsensical, and here I'm just gonna throw a fax machine your way for no fucking reason.
See, I think that we should just let them die. There shouldn't be a fax emoji. Like, we should just...
Speaking of letting them die, we should probably let this episode
I know, right?
So... Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
We're going to continue the fax machine conversation to ourselves and not
where,
subject you to it any longer. There's burrata and prosciutto calling my name in the refrigerator. The sangarees are empty, but I think there may be rosé.
Ooh, there's definitely rosé. Yeah.
Sorry you can't have any burrata.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening. This has been Beyond Reproach.
Yeah.
With Tux Lurzol.
Stephanie Domingo signing off. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Love you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you like us, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just search Beyond Reproach or Beyond Reproach Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks!